And so what is happening? If it's not sexism, if it's not the marketing budget, what is the actual problem? The real issue for Marvel is quite simple. They intended to build an ecosystem, but instead they built a funnel. Last weekend, The Marvels opened, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe's new big budget blockbuster. It stars Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, who's been in the MCU for some time. It also brought in two other characters who were introduced in Disney Plus shows. And this movie, like a lot of people thought it would, it absolutely bombed.
Wow.
It was the lowest opening ever. And people are trying to figure out exactly why this happened. And apparently there were a lot of problems on set. So maybe that was it. Maybe it was the screenwriter. Maybe it was the producer. A lot of people are saying, this is sexism. Obviously, men are just too insecure to like embrace a female lead character, although the numbers were literally so low that men and women just didn't go to it. So I'm not sure that that's fully true. Is it misogyny? Is it poor marketing? There was an actor strike, so they didn't get to do the same amount of press that they normally do, even though there was like $100 million+ marketing budget and you couldn't go anywhere without seeing an advertisement for this new movie, The Marvels. What was the actual problem? And I think it was none of those things. I think there's a way, way simpler reason that this movie just simply couldn't get off the ground. And it brings it down to a more base level of understanding what you're doing in the broader sense of running an organization. And to me, this is an issue, not even necessarily of content, although I have heard a lot of people make very nuanced critique of the movie, just not really going anywhere and having a lot of plot holes. Not necessarily some social ill, while there are things like misogyny and there are people who just aren't going to embrace a female character lead. I think it is so much simpler than that. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people are kind of poking fun at the character who plays Miss Marvel because she basically said, this is Bob Iger's problem. This is the CEO of Disney's problem. And it might surprise you to find out, I agree. In the New York Post, it says, Marvel star says huge box office flop is Bob Iger's problem. Let's go down and read. It says that it had a catastrophic 78% drop at the box office from the first week into the second. And having taken in just 116 million worldwide so far, it's one of the biggest disasters in the 15-year history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, star Iman Vellani, who plays Kamala Khan, said that the failure is not her problem, it's Disney CEO Bob Iger's. I don't want to focus on something that's not even in my control because what's the point, Vellani 21 said in an interview. That's for Bob Iger. The Disney-produced film, which was made on a hefty $200 million budget, currently holds a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes, making it the third lowest MCU film. Here we go. It says the Marvels stars Iman Vellani, Brie Larson, and Teyana Paris. They could wind up the biggest box office bomb of all time. In a 0-star review, the Post called the movie starring Brie Larson and said it was a sad study of the downfall of America's favorite screen franchise. ABC News' Peter Travers echoed those sentiments, writing, the MCU, once the spawner of glories, is stuck in a rut. The time for a rethink is now. Vellani went on to say, the box office has nothing to do with me. Despite the film's failure, she said, I'm happy with the finished product, and the people that I care about enjoyed the film. It's a fun movie, and I'm just so happy I can share it with people. The Marvels could end up with a domestic box office gross of less than $100 million, the franchise worst ever. So this is a massive failure on Marvel's part, and Vellani, who plays Miss Marvel, is like, not my problem. I showed up, I did my thing, I acted, I learned my lines, I ran around, and every review I've heard said she is like the brightest part of the movie, that she really does do a good job. And so what is happening? If it's not sexism, if it's not the marketing budget, what is the actual problem? The real issue for Marvel is quite simple. They intended to build an ecosystem, but instead they built a funnel. They intended to build an ecosystem, and instead they built a funnel. So what the heck does that even mean? An ecosystem and a funnel. With the introduction of Disney Plus, which is Disney's streaming service, they started building out the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not just on the big screen, but for the first time in television shows, in these series that would have 6 episodes or 8 episodes, 45 minutes a piece. All of a sudden, there was this massive amount of content. And the intention for that was to build out the cinematic universe into an ecosystem that not only existed on the big screen, but also had content that was consumed by users at home. And this ecosystem was supposed to take what was so unique about the MCU, which is this idea that, over their first 10 years, they took 30 films and told one giant story, and all of the characters connected, and there was backstories and sub-stories and subplots and plots within plots and relationships within relationships. And man, everyone followed this. It spawned a whole bunch of YouTube channels like New Rock Stars and people on Screen Rant who do an amazing job showing you all the Easter eggs and connectivity, and nerds like me who take it all in and are just like, wow. But it didn't create an ecosystem because, number one, and everyone's talked about this, there was just such a dilution with the amount of content coming at you. Instead, what it created was more of a funnel. And there are all kinds of companies that build funnels, and they build them on purpose. I'm a pastor of a local church, and we are creating a community of people, but we are trying to move people along a path that you would call theologically sanctification, which is learning more and growing more and challenging yourself more to become more and more like Jesus over time. And this could change someday. But in the church world right now, for most churches, certainly for our local church, we have a funnel. And the top of the funnel is Sunday service. That is when the absolute most people come. And so we have like 1,000 people who would call MetaChurch their home, and a little over 1,000 people on any given Sunday who would come. They don't all come at the same time, but about 1,000 plus people. And that's the top of our funnel. And once they're there, now we're inviting them in, get into a life team, and they get into a life team, but that's a smaller percentage of the total. And over time, we hope that that percentage grows and grows to where like 80+% of our people are in a life team. And then, we call people to serve on our team so that we can put on our Sunday services, and that's less people. And then we call people, now we've started a program that's a really intense semester-based program. We can currently only hold like about 50 people. We're hoping to expand that to 100. That's 1/10 of, the people who could come on Sunday. And so the funnel gets smaller and smaller, right? Other companies do this. They try to get you in with whatever their big product is and then add other products, but they know that that's going to diminish as time goes on. The other thing you build is an ecosystem. And a good example of that is Apple. Apple built a great ecosystem. And there's this great story of when Steve Jobs, he was fired for just being a complete jerk. And then they bombed it. So they brought him back on, and he kind of learned his lesson. And they had 90 something products, and they didn't have anything to do with each other. And so famously, he went up on the board and he made 4 quadrants, and he said, we're going to do 4 things. And all 4 of these things are going to speak to each other. So Apple's an ecosystem because once you have a MacBook, if you're still carrying an Android because you hate yourself, wow, then all of a sudden you realize you can copy something on an iPhone and click paste on your MacBook, and it pastes it there. And it's like they speak to each other. And you can turn on your front-facing camera on your phone, and it show up on your Mac. There's an ecosystem there. And so if you get one Apple product, you're likely to get more and more and more. And why not get an iPad? And why not get the AirPods, because you just put them in and it speaks to everything. And there's probably some Apple haters out there, and that's fine. But also,
Stop the cap.
That's an ecosystem. And Marvel wanted to create an ecosystem, where it's like you go to the movies, and then you go back home and you rewatch the episodes, and you're just falling more in love with these characters, and you're getting a deep backstory on Scarlet Witch because you've got 6 episodes and you're seeing her grief, and then when she's on the big screen and Doctor Strange, you're going to feel even more connected. And yes, there are the nerds like me who are going to watch it all and appreciate it all. But what they've actually created is a funnel. And I think one of the very simple reasons that the Marvels has done so poorly is because they turned a funnel upside down. Miss Marvel, Disney Plus show, much smaller audience. You had to watch 6 or 7 or 8 episodes to even know who she is. Photon, Dude, I'm a huge Marvel fan. I can't even think of her real name. Monica Rambeau. I can't think of it.
Stop the cap.
She was like the tertiary character in a Disney Plus show. She's like beyond the funnel. She didn't even make the funnel. There was Scarlet Witch, and there was Vision, and there was their kids, and there was the CIA agent. She was in like 3 of the episodes. Nobody knows who she is, and nobody cares who she is. And even though Captain Marvel did have her own movie, it didn't do well in the ratings. And since then, they have not kept her relevant. She was in Endgame for like 5 seconds. She's been in some post-credit scenes that nobody cared about. So even she is not like a big funnel. And let's do the opposite, because Loki just came out and it was a great show and it's like critically acclaimed and everyone loved it. And all the MCU nerds were super thrilled about it, right? But it's the opposite. Loki came from the big part of the funnel. I mean, he's been in multiple movies. He's been the big bad of the very first Avengers, right? You can't get bigger than that. And he was in all the Thor movies, and he was in Ragnarok, and he was in Endgame. And, so we have this huge funnel that filters people down to Loki's Disney Plus show, the small side of the funnel. And I don't think they understand that, and they haven't created what they think they've created. They wanted an ecosystem, but they built a funnel. In 1 Corinthians, Paul says, everything should be done in a fitting and orderly way. It's important to always address reality. And the reality is what they did with Disney Plus was not what they thought it was going to be. And it's creating problems for them. It's creating a scenario where to even appreciate the big budget blockbuster movies in the theaters, you have to be the level of Marvel nerd that's going to take in hours and hours and hours and hours of Disney Plus content. And most people think Disney Plus is something to put their kids in front of so they can get 45 minutes of silence in their life. They don't think that it's something that they have to do homework on to be able to even understand what's going on in a movie that your family of 5 just paid $78 to go to because everything is so ridiculously expensive. I also think that there is a parallel in scripture. In the Gospels, Matthew chapter 22, it says the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, so they met together to question Jesus again. They're trying to trap him. And one of them, an expert in the religious law, tried to trap him with this question: Teacher, what is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? What are they asking? They're like, hey, lay out the funnel for us. Tell us the most important law, and then we'll kind of be able to filter that down and prioritize. But Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And a second is equally important: love your neighbor and yourself. And then he says this: the entire funnel, the entire law, and all the demands of the prophets, all of them are based on just these 2 things. In other words, if you get those 2 things right, it creates an ecosystem of righteousness in your life. If you don't address reality, you cannot fix your reality. If Disney continues to believe that they have created an ecosystem, they will continue being plagued by the bottleneck of an upside down funnel. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you check out the full podcast and subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. Link is in the description below.